Good morning. A very, very warm welcome to all of you here today to this event on manufacturing and engineering. It's between Glasgow Chamber of Commerce and Scottish Engineering, and I'm delighted to welcome so many of you here this morning. We've got a great level of content today with 3 super speakers, and we want to make sure the main focus is on that and giving you the opportunity to ask questions and contribute in your own ways from your own different business communities' perspective. And we have today got Paul Sheeran, who I'm going to introduce just shortly, who's the Chief Executive of Scottish Engineering. We've been working in partnership with Paul and the whole engineering sector for a few months now. We've got Doug Morwood, who's the Chief Executive of Insight Futures, who's going to be talking a little bit about the wider opportunity for engineering businesses and the circular economy. We've got Andrew Nelson from Superglass, who's going to give you a business case study example. And then we've got Martijn, Lopes, Cardozo from the Circular Economy in the Netherlands, who are our partner, one of our partners that we work with at the Chamber. So just by means of a bit of introduction, the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce has been working in the circular economy space now for several years, and we have an initiative called Circular Glasgow, which I'm hoping most of you will be aware of. If you are indeed not aware of course, you'll be able to contact the team to follow up a bit more after this session. I suppose we came at this from the position initially prior to climate emergencies being declared, that this was very much all about innovation and future-proofing your business, but with a backdrop of various different business benefits that would allow a business to also help to contribute towards the climate change agenda. And that's obviously changed radically in the last year as we all went into climate change emergency mode, and then much more radically recently with this COVID-19 crisis that we find ourselves in. And certainly from a number of the discussions we've been having in the last 2 months, the kind of mood music's obviously all about business survival right now, and that's everybody's main focus and area of concern, but with a mindful eye to looking a little bit further ahead, with the circular economy presenting many really great ways for businesses to look at adapting and becoming more resilient and becoming part of a more circular economy in the round. So manufacturing from our point of view is a priority. Our full Sunday name is Glasgow Chamber of Commerce and Manufacturers. We're born in 1783, so we've been around for a very long time, and manufacturing's been a hugely important part of Glasgow's economy for a very long time. But in addition to the business engagement stuff that we've been doing with our members and the business community in Glasgow, wider city discussions have also been ongoing for the last couple of years now about how do we engage the wider stakeholders of the city to make it a truly circular economy in Glasgow and beyond. So that's just a couple of words from me in terms of scene setting, but I'd like to hand over to Paul to just say some introductory words around engineering specifically and the sector and where he's coming from today.
Well, thanks, Alison, and I'm really grateful to Circular Glasgow, who came to speak to us on this topic, I think sometime at the end of last year. And I suppose it's worth remembering that, underlining what Alison said, there was a time before all we talked about was COVID-19, and in fact, if you sort of cast your mind back only to January of this year, our major talking point amongst member companies was, in fact, the climate emergency. And we had surveyed companies at that time. 92% of companies had come to us and said that they recognised that the climate emergency was real and required an urgent response. But above that, I think what works well to the reason for this call and why we continue the discussion to push ahead with this was two-thirds of companies were actively looking at ways that they could change their operation to make to reduce the impact of the manufacturing operations they have, and 52% of companies were looking at redesigning the product, service, or diversifying to take their business in a direction which was less impactful on the climate. So there's good mandate and interest, I believe, for that, and I think now, although we are in the midst of an absolute maelstrom with coronavirus, we're also all talking about what the new normal will look like, and this realization that the new normal isn't likely to look much like the old normal. So never a better time to have a look at elements, especially like this. So I think the event is really timely today. hope you enjoy, and my thanks to all the people who put in the hard work and time to put this event on today. Alison, pass it back to you.
Thanks very much, Paul, for that. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for Paul to come in again when we get to the question and answer stage as well, because I know he's got some of his own thoughts about circular economy and the importance of it, and I think even more important in the current times that we find ourselves in just now. So I'm very delighted to welcome our very first contributor this morning, Doug Morwood. And Doug is a consummate enthusiast. He's extraordinarily contagious with his passion for this whole subject, and he's been in this space for some 20 years now. He holds various directorships at a range of companies. He's one of our partners in Glasgow now in terms of the work we're doing, so we're delighted to have him here today. And he's going to be talking a little bit about why circular economy is entirely relevant for business and what that could mean for you. So I suppose everybody will be coming today thinking, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my business? And where could the opportunity to be? And I have every confidence that Doug is going to set us up rather nicely with exactly just that. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Doug to take us through his contribution this morning. Doug.
Thanks, Alison. That was a bit strange. I was on the call and my computer decided to restart, so I've missed your introduction, but just managed to come on back on. So I hope I haven't missed too much, but thanks for the opportunity to talk a bit about circular economy and what that might mean for manufacturing. In fact, for the wider economy in general. Excuse me, I've got a bit of hay fever, so if I sniff a bit through that, apologies. Next slide, please, Cheryl. I think it's obvious, and everybody has had this common experience of the shock to the system that the pandemic has caused, not just here locally, but globally. And this VUCA world, this 1990s military term to describe a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous marketplace or economy, or even on a world basis, is now a common experience in personal lives and business lives. And we need to adapt. We need to develop new tools, new skills, and most importantly, a new mindset to be able to navigate this, I think, now permanent landscape. And what does that mean for business? Next slide, please. Is it an opportunity or a threat? And I think a lot of that obviously depends on current context. We'll all be looking at immediate survival, resilience, recovery. What are we going to do? How are we going to be able to build back better? And I suppose there are others who are seeing this as an opportunity to say, well, if it's going to increase our opportunity for digitalization, maybe different habits and behaviors, working from home, do we need to all be moving to traveling every day to offices? What other changes are going to come from as we emerge from this current pandemic? Design out waste. How can we look at waste being a word that doesn't even, it shouldn't exist. It should be that it's a material that has a value somewhere. We shouldn't be just looking at circular economy. Next slide. From the idea that we deal with it at the end of a cycle. The current linear approach in value change is highly inefficient. So there's a big opportunity to actually become more efficient, more productive, and create more margin if we take a different design intent to our production processes. So a typical linear take, make, and waste approach is to take materials out of the ground, make something out of it, and then sell it. And unfortunately, what we've got is a consumptive society where we don't tend to value what we buy as much because it's maybe cheaper and it's easier to dispose of than to repair it or to design it for more durability. Next slide, please. The alternative is that we design with an intent to maintain the materiality and the value of that product or service and the service that goes with it for as long as possible. And that different design intent can realize new opportunities for not just your own organization, but the whole industry. And the closer the loop to maintain, reuse, remanufacture, you can see recycle is one of the lesser aims of the circular economy. It's the kind of byproduct of probably poor design. So how do we move from the current state of a linear economy to a circular economy? How do you as an individual business or as a sector come together to doing that? Next slide. Gary Gillespie, who's the chief economist for the Scottish Government, actually mentioned that he was writing for Scottish Engineering, that COVID-19 has fundamentally changed many of the key assumptions relating to the operation of the global economy and how the economy and businesses operate. How business operates will change significantly. This causes disruption and uncertainty at this time, also drive innovation and provides an opportunity to make step change in many areas, such as the transition to net zero, which is driving new opportunities in energy supply and the circular economy. Manufacturing and engineering has a huge opportunity to be part of that transition and hopefully transformation, because moving from the current state to a future state, we can't incrementally get to that future state. There is going to have to be radical change in order to do that. And we're going to have to move at pace if we've got any chance of hitting or being below the targets that we've set as a goal for 2030. And with COP26 still coming to Glasgow, we hope in November 2021, then there's a real opportunity for Scottish businesses to look at local manufacturing, to work at a systemic level and come together as a multi-stakeholder community to be able to explore innovative ways where we can look at local supply chains, develop our local manufacturing capabilities, and look at how circular innovation and net zero drivers can create new opportunities. Next slide. And the way we have to do this, we have to be aware of our current context. We can't just say, let's go and do this bright new future when we're in the middle of a crisis at the moment. And the main focus for many businesses and people will be just on survival. But we also need to look at how can we reinvent at a sector level, as an individual business level, and as a new value chain to design and deliver a more circular economy that helps us hit our net zero targets. And this context that we've got in Scotland is really interesting because Circular Glasgow and the team at the Chamber will know they've been really successful, along with other colleagues in Zero Waste Scotland and the Scottish Government, in really putting Scotland on the map as almost an experimental territory for exploring climate and net zero and circular opportunities. But we can't be just jumping into innovation if we're on the operating table. You know, we need to walk before we can run. And the main thing is to have a resilient core. So we need to look at each of our businesses and the changes that we can make to ensure that we just can emerge back into our businesses from the lockdown, that we have to then look at reshaping that core. What's the operating model? Are we able to manage the current state business model and look at opportunities for small changes, adopting more digital interactions with our customers internally as an operating capability, and with other key stakeholders in supply chain? And then how can we really look at creating a real transition or transformation from a linear business model, which produces so much waste for the business and for society and for the environment, to a more circular business model, and that's through business model innovation. Next slide. So an awful lot of the time I hear from any industry, whether it's manufacturing, construction, fashion, is that there's a chicken v egg challenge. And next, move on. The chicken is their circular procurement, is it being demanded by the customer, the clients, that they want to see circular or decarbonisation embedded within their procurement. And the egg is the industry readiness. So the industry doesn't get ready to be able to provide circular opportunities or circular innovation because it's not been asked for. And the chicken, it's not been asked for because the industry isn't ready. So there has to be a way to intelligently integrate the demands of the customers and the clients, and even educate them to be asking for the industry to provide circular innovation. Move forward. I think there's a big opportunity, as I said previously, here in Scotland for manufacturing to revitalise manufacturing in Scotland. The globalisation kind of neoliberal approach, offshoring and looking at these global supply chains, as we've seen from the pandemic, they're massively brittle and fragile. And there's a huge opportunity with the enabling environment we have here in Scotland and supportive agencies like Circular Glasgow and Glasgow Chamber of Commerce to be representing you in businesses and to find ways to integrate as a system to move forward to a new circular economy within Scotland, and manufacturing engineering to take a leading role in recombining your assets and resources in a more compelling way to give you competitive advantage and a sustainable future. Next slide. So it's an invitation really to get involved. There's lots of talk, and it's very important to be educated and to understand, and circular economy is quite a complex subject matter. But the real opportunity and invitation is to get stuck in. It's only going to change if you get involved. And if you get involved by involving your supply chain, your customers, and try and create more enabling environments for innovation, and particularly circular innovation, to take hold. Thank you very much.
Doug, thank you so much. That was excellent. As you'll have heard there, I mean, one of the things that we found in our journey is what I call the recycle factor, and a lot of people have generally thought, oh, that's circular economy, that's that recycling thing. And as you'll have seen from one of the charts that Doug used there at the beginning, yes, it's still an important factor, but actually it's caused by poor design in the first instance. So it's actually probably the last factor that you'd want to kind of have to do, if you like. So, you know, Doug's talked a lot about survival, the conditions that we're in at the moment, but the opportunity to redesign and business innovation around all of that, moving to new operating models. And that's, I guess, what we've been able to talk about, the various different circular business models through our previous work with Circular Economy in the Netherlands, basically to become a better business. So, you know, amidst these survival kind of environment that we work in at the moment, you know, what can be better for you using some of these models that Doug's talking about. And then that whole tension between the stick and the carrot, or the chicken and the egg, you know, is it incentivizing business to do something, or is it going to be regulated? And I suppose our view has been that we anticipated prior to this current emergency that regulation is going to be coming through, and you saw signs of that just before this crisis of various bills going through and so on and so forth. So how can you get your competitive advantage as you go through your business survival thinking at the moment and get ahead of the curve, and, as Doug's saying, get stuck in. So thank you very much for that, Doug. That was an excellent introduction. Next up, we have Superglass, and actually this is obviously a company that's in Scotland, so a great case study from within the country. And thanks again to Paul and Sarah for making sure that we had such a great case study for us today. So Andrew Nelson is joining us, and he is the Quality and Environmental Manager at Superglass. Now he's going to talk a little bit about the business and what Superglass actually does, and actually why they went into a circular economy mindset and what worked for them and what were the implications of that. Now, as you will not be surprised to hear, none of this is automatically easy. You know, a lot of conversations are quite difficult. Some of the change in processes can be quite difficult, and you're having to bring a team with you along the way. And I think that's also a really important point, the leadership bit with team coming with you in terms of how a business can sort of transform. So Andrew, I'm going to pass over to you now, and you can share some of your own insights in the journey that you've been on with Superglass.
So I'm just going to give a quick introduction, obviously, about Superglass, what our environmental history was, and then obviously our role in the circular economy and what our future plans are. Next slide, please. So the background is that we formerly were the only independent manufacturer of glass wool insulation in the UK. This factory here was established in 1987, 16-acre site, employing about 180 people. And we're manufacturing a range of thermal insulation products or acoustic insulation products. Next slide, please. So in 2017, the site became part of the Techno Nicole Group. And on the back of that, we actually secured a €43 million investment on the site under the control of, well, under the name of Project New Horizon. And that project really was a foundation for some of our further reductions. So there was a major environmental improvements as part of that project and built into that project. We were going to reduce NOx emissions significantly. There was a large amount of energy reuse and optimization, and also waste reduction was built into that project, so we create less waste, use less energy, and emit less NOx. Next slide, please. Then the actual objective of the project was to double the output or capacity from the factory, and also reduce our cost per tonne of production unit. But there was also, even during the project, we were very active in trying to encourage local contractors. So 40% of the contractors we used were within 30-mile radius of the factory. So that was a very deliberate attempt, a very deliberate sort of concept in the project, and an important one. The project objectives were met in full, so the project was completed in May, June last year, and now we're just trying to assess the full environmental efficiency targets that we aimed for. We're still validating that at this point in time, but the signs are very encouraging. Next slide, please. So moving on to our history from an environmental perspective. By 2013, Superglass had a very, very bad reputation with the regulatory bodies, in particular SEPA and the HSE. And this really was down to lack of investment under the previous management, and just poor processes and controls. So in 2013, there was a new management team established at Superglass, and one of the key parts of that team was to return us to full compliance. The operations director, Mark Atherton, really strongly believes that once you achieve compliance, you'll get the operational costs and benefits that come with that, and you'll enhance your reputation. As I said, we had a very, very poor reputation, not only with SEPA, but with our local neighbours. We were not regarded as a good neighbour. Next slide, please. So again, just graphically, 2013, we were at the low end. SEPA would describe Chancellor on their chart here. And really, we were very, very reactive rather than proactive. And it's fair to say that SEPA did not trust us. We jumped forward to 2017 and we become fully compliant. And we'd moved from being reactive to being very proactive and working with SEPA. Next slide, please. So in 2017, we signed, we'd moved to full compliance, and then we became the first manufacturer in Scotland to sign a sustainable growth agreement with SEPA. This is part of SEPA's One Planet Prosperity. It's one arm of it, and we were determined we wanted to be first, because we recognised that we needed to build in our environmental performance into our sort of mindset, and it was going to be something that was going to distinguish us from other companies. But it's also a very public commitment from Superglass and SEPA to go beyond compliance. And from a sort of company perspective, it was a very useful tool. One, it puts certain internal pressures on us to actually challenge ourselves to go beyond compliance and reduce the footprint of the factory from an environmental perspective. Next slide, please. So within that agreement, we actually agreed we were going to aim to reduce our water usage and our effluent, the amount of effluent we're producing. We also made a commitment to reduce our energy by 47.5 million kilowatt hours per year. We were going to commit to building a new furnace that would give us NOx limits 30% below the European standard. And we'd already committed to doing an R&D project with the University of Sheffield, where we were aiming to look at improving the performance of our products with more environmentally friendly credentials, as it were. Next slide, please. So the circular economy, as the previous speaker already mentioned, there was really three parts from our point of view. Is to design out the waste and the pollution that we are creating or using, keep our products and material use down internally, look at how we're using our own materials, and then the regeneration of any natural systems. Next slide, please. So I suppose that's Mark's slide, really just underlining the previous point. So I'll just jump that one. Next slide, please. So again, some practical examples of our role. I mean, the first thing we challenge ourselves is that our product is actually an environmental project. It's a product that's restricting heat transfer in buildings. But not only that, that same product saves 300 times its the amount of energy used to manufacture that product. So it's a very good story. And on the back of that, 84% of the product we manufacture is from post-consumer or post-construction waste, i.e. glass. So we are already taking a lot of material and recycling it. So it's a very important part, and hence why in the previous slides when I mentioned our environmental performance, for us to have we sell an environmental product and not having a good, strong environmental compliance and sustainable growth aspirations, then it really doesn't make sense to us. It's a key part of our strategy moving forward. Next slide, please. So, and again, examples. So during our process, we do recycle the wet waste we create, and scrap. We minimise scrap and recycle where possible. We've, even on the back of New Horizon, we had introduced an energy management system that basically looks at lost opportunities in the process, whether it's putting equipment down that could go down sooner, when we have stoppages, etc. We've worked closely even with our hauliers, so a large project was to look at how do we maximise and reduce our costs, the haulage elements. So basically looking for return loads coming to Scotland that are empty. We filter, going from Scotland down to England, we can fill those trucks, and we identified hauliers that could do that very efficiently. We look at returning pallets that our products are supplied on. We return them here and reuse them, and we designed our furnace emission. We are looking at a process of actually capturing the energy from our furnace and reusing that energy. I mean, one of the key parts of a lot of the discussion that we had with SEPA, prior to 2017, as a business, we were loss-making, and a lot of this was driven by a need to survive. So although these are key environmental objectives, they're also economic ones as well. There was no split in our thinking that the environment, this was going to cost us money. It was actually going to save us money, recycling energy, recycling water, maximising the amount of recycled waste that we bring in to use it to make our products. So there was never a clash, and we were always very effective at tackling that. Next slide, please. So that's where we are just now, but our future, we have now, in collaboration with the University of Manchester's Material Science Department, we're looking at alternative resins that are coming from recycled materials. It's a very exciting project we're working on, and we're in the initial stages of that. We're investigating possible applications for scrap that we can't recycle on site, as there are other insulation opportunities that we are trying to look for. We are also investigating the possible recycling of our products at end of life. Admittedly, the normal lifetime of these products is about 25 years, or the lifetime of the building. However, we are now investigating, is it possible for us to take that material and recreate glass from it. We're also looking at packaging and looking at biodegradable plastics in our packaging. And as I mentioned earlier, we're also looking at installing a CHP plant or battery power in the plant, and also the capture of energy from the furnace for reuse on site in our downstream processing. Next slide, please. We believe, and as I said, it's a key part of our sort of strategy going forward to reduce our carbon footprint and actually show leadership in that, because, as I said earlier, we are making an environmentally friendly product. We're making an insulation material, so we need to sort of show that and distinguish ourselves in that way. We're increasingly looking at reusable materials, trying to source locally if possible. But again, what we have proven is that all these objectives and targets we set give us an economic benefit. So they're not exclusively environmental, hence why they're sustainable. And as a further example for the work we've already undertaken at the University of Sheffield is looking at improving the quality of our materials so that we can supply the same level of thermal performance using less material. And that's something that we're working on currently. And that's me.
Super, thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Some really practical and very pithy lessons in there in terms of that particular company's perspective. And I think very interesting to note that for different reasons of a different survival need, but survival was the one of the key drivers at the time when you were doing that transition with, you know, economics alongside sustainability being key drivers to that ambition. So, and wanting to be first. So that in itself is always probably a good ambition to have when you're taking things like this out. Distinguishing from others in terms of the competitive advantage, I think is another important point that has been made there. And going beyond compliance, you know, the system tells us to do X, Y, Z things, but where does it make good business sense to go beyond those compliance expectations? I think that's a really useful point to make as well. So Andrew's shown about the significant savings in energy consumption, and that 84% of the product was using recycled products. So some, you know, big stats going on in there in terms of what the company's achieved. But also just laterally showing the kind of unexpected or slightly different partnerships that the business has embarked on with academic partnerships. And yes, another important point around local sourcing wherever possible, which I think is something that we've all been hearing an awful lot more about, certainly in the last couple of months. So thanks very much again to Andrew for that. So next speaker and our final speaker today. As I said at the outset, the Chamber's been on this journey for some time now, and our partnership is with Zero Waste Scotland and Glasgow City Council and the Circular Economy in the Netherlands, and now more recently also Insight Futures too. So it's great to have that partnership extended. And the Circular Economy, I guess, were instrumental in helping us get to where we have got to, because they were bringing that global perspective of taking circular economy out through cities. And they really got us started by helping us to take our first steps, which was indeed a city scan of Glasgow, looking at all the economic data around where would we be wise to start. And the manufacturing sector was actually the first place and one of the most significant places that we would want to do things. So it's just why today is particularly relevant. So today I'm delighted to introduce Martijn Lopes Cardozo, who is the new Chief Executive of Circular Economy. He's going to talk from a range of perspectives today, which is super. So he previously was the Chief Exec of Black Bear Carbon. So he'll be able to give a little bit of perspective from that point of view, but he's also going to talk a little bit about the benefits and the opportunities for embracing different circular principles, because a lot of the business models that we've been working with over the past few years have been basically inspired by the way they've articulated that. Some of the language is different globally when you hear different organisations speaking about it, but the essence is the same. And ultimately why circular economy is relevant to business. So Martijn, I'd like to hand over to you now, and I will take myself off screen again.
Thanks, Alison, very much. Thank you for the invite. And indeed, we have been partnering with you all for a while and really enjoying it. So maybe a little bit about my background. Actually, I'm an engineer by training from Delft, then spent most of my time after doing an MBA at Harvard in the West Coast doing digital ventures. And in the last 6 years, as Alison mentioned, worked on transition to the circular economy and worked on a company called Black Bear Carbon. And for those who don't know that example, it's basically what we do is we upcycle end-of-life tires, so truck tires, passenger car tires, other type of tires, into valuable raw materials. So we basically extract a black powder called carbon black, steel, as well as oil and gas from the tires. So I think that's the main focus of today. So I'll give a little perspective on Black Bear, and then I'll segue into circular economy and take a bit more broader perspective. So Black Bear is a company with about 40 people right now. It raised about 25 million. We built an initial plant. We were also selected as a Clean Tech 100 company and a technology pioneer from the World Economic Forum. That being said, the company actually went through a lot of ups and downs, as I was with the company from the beginning. And I want to share some of the lessons with you in terms of, when you want to do a, pretty much 100% circular business, what are the biggest challenges? But also what are the things that, I think we did well and maybe other people can benefit from. Before I do that, let me quickly give you a perspective on Black Bear. It will take about 3 minutes, and then I'll go into the opportunities and challenges, and then into the broader circular economy perspective. So each year, more than 2 billion tires reach the end of their life. A lot of them actually, as you see here, previously got burnt. There's still quite a bit of landfill, but frankly, a lot of them get shipped to Asia and other places where they're disposed of. And this is, of course, a massive environmental problem. The other issue is if you look at what's in a tire, it's rubber, steel, and a material called carbon black. Carbon black is pretty much in a lot of things that are black around you, like paint, ink, but 70% of all the carbon black goes into tires. And it takes about 2.5 liters of crude oil to create 1 kilo of product. And then it goes into the tires and it's burned again. So the business concept that Black Bear had adopted was actually quite simple. So what we did is we started with the tires. Then, of course, those became end-of-life tires. We took then the steel out, and then that resulted into, as you can see here, into the carbon black. And the carbon black then can be reused back into tires. So basically, then you have the complete loop back again. Or you could use it in paint, ink, and other applications. And the beauty is that for each factory we build, we can save more than 1 million trees in terms of CO2 footprint. So that's actually quite massive. So it's the footprint of the factory is about a soccer field, and you could plant. And I think we did the math. It's pretty much like a big city, the area of a big city planted with trees in terms of CO2 savings. So a huge opportunity there. The other good news is that there's about 2 billion tires, so you could build about 1,500 of these installations worldwide. So it's quite a big CO2 saving opportunity. So what are some of the lessons of Black Bear? So I think a couple of things that I think went well, and that it has to do with how we actually got product market fit relatively quickly. So even while we were in the lab and we're actually doing the different experiments, we involved basically all the big buyers of carbon black very early on. So the companies like Michelin, Goodyear, in the tires, AkzoNobel, and other paint companies in paints and coatings. We got plastic companies where it's used. We got ink companies. And they were, we didn't try to sell them anything, but what we tried to do is get the specifications of, what would it take if you want to replace your virgin material with, or, upcycled carbon black. And we got a lot of valuable input in terms of changing the product specs. But what that did is that we actually had a group of about 30 to 40 companies who went through us, through the journey of, in the lab, figuring it out, in larger industrial scales, figuring it out. And we were unable to raise about 15 million for the first factory. And we got outputs. We basically had customers from day one. And that's actually, in a lot of cases, a big issue where people do recycle things, but they either get very low prices or they have very hard time to find product market fit. So our core economics actually worked really well because our feedstock cost was much lower because oil is much more expensive than end-of-life tires. And our output revenues were actually quite high, and we had some interesting side streams. So I think that's one thing. The other thing I think that went relatively well is how we did the technology scale up. So what's really challenging in a lot of technical environments is how do you get from lab scale to a full scale factory? And typically what people try to do is raise money for what they call a demo plant. Here's the issue with a demo plant. It's typically, all you do there is you demonstrate the technology, but the demo plant is basically unprofitable. So you're basically raising money to, for an unprofitable project, hoping that it will have returns if you build the second one. It's notoriously hard to fundraise for. So we took a little bit of a different approach. So what we did is, after we did all our labs tests and we got customer validation and we knew we had a good product, what we did is actually loaded up a couple big trucks with granulates from tires and went to toll manufacturing or to big suppliers in Germany. And we went to the first place, we went for the first process step, then we load everything back up the truck and basically made a round for whole Germany, leveraging other people's production facilities on an industrial scale. And we documented it well, made a lot of videos, wrote it all up, and that allowed us to do technical due diligence by a well-known engineering firm who basically said, except for the material transport, you have good proof that the technology also works at scale. And off the back of that, we were able to raise quite substantial funding, around 15 million, mostly from very conservative banks, because in the Netherlands, and I'm pretty confident it's the same in the UK, venture capital is hard to get for these larger tickets that are pre-revenue. So that's basically how we did our upscaling, and I think so the three things that went well: involving customers early on, establishing product market fit. The second one is how we did our engineering scale up. And the third one, I would argue, was the marketing. So I gave some accolades in the beginning. And I think what the company did really well is getting international exposure, not only in the Netherlands, but also, the CNN came by with a crew, we had a World Economic Forum. So we got a lot of attention, which also, of course, attracted capital for the venture. So what are the things that were more difficult? So one of the things that was more difficult, we really struggled with the getting the production to higher levels. Typically for new process engineering solutions, as you all know, and I'm talking to a group of engineers now, it takes a couple technology cycles to go through that. So typically a first generation technology, second and third. And there were a lot of people basically in waiting mode. They basically said, well, let you build the first one and then the second. And, by the time it's sort of mature, we're willing to start investing and rolling it out. And we did struggle through those different life cycles. So there was a big challenge, I think, for the operation. The other thing that happened was we were co-located at the site of our joint venture partner, which was a big tire collector, which worked really well because we're close to the feedstock and we had room. But unfortunately, one night we also, when we were ramping up, the roof caught fire of the building and the whole plant burned down. So one of the, lessons learned there is sort of, embedding yourself in a, good ecosystem and a good industrial site, and also finding the right partners early on who can help you with engineering challenges that are hard with a small company like Black Bear with very innovative technology is worthwhile. So basically where the company is now is they found a new site, and they're building in Rotterdam, and they're planning to build a 50 million new sort of next generation technology. So my expectation is that they will have a very good future, but like doing something like this from scratch in new technology in a new market is definitely not a easy thing to do. So maybe moving then on a little bit to circle economy. So when we decided to build the larger factory, sort of we basically decided to do a couple things differently. And the first one was we involved a well-known German engineering firm, Mannesmann, to help us do the detailed engineering, because we found as a company we're really good at the high-level engineering, but a lot of the issues were in the detailed engineering. We also decided that we needed actually a complete new management team. So the people who were really good at the conceptual phase and establishing product market fit was not necessarily the right team to develop and build really good working factories. So we recruited a CTO from a publicly listed clean tech company called Avantium in the Netherlands, CEO from the Albemarle Group who ran a large division, and a CFO who worked with Renewi, basically the merger between Shanks and Van Gansenwinkel, basically a big environmental garbage collection group. So that's maybe another lesson learned. If you go through these different life cycles as a scale up, there's different people who need to be there to bring the company to the next level. So I was on the board of Circle. So when the last CEO left a couple of months ago, I was asked to step in interim. And as Alison said, I've been asked by the board to now join full time. So there was a journey I made from being a CEO of one company to now leading more of a movement. But it's a very exciting place to be. And at Circle, we try to develop practical and scalable solutions to implement in the circular economy. And as Alison mentioned, we work a lot with regions, with cities, but also with governments. So actually we did an analysis of how circular is the whole world and launched that in Davos at the World Economic Forum. Today, actually, we launched it in the Netherlands after doing Austria. So we see a lot of interest from governments, cities, regions, but also businesses to implement the circular economy. And that's maybe, I think, my most important pointer. I fully realize what sort of Scotland's going through right now in terms of its manufacturing footprint and the implications on exports. My sense is, and I'm involved in quite a bit of conversation with the European Union as well as the other sort of nation states and governments. There's a lot of emphasis on, building back better and building sort of, in a green way. And my expectation, there will be quite a bit of, government funding or, government links to government funding in terms of infrastructure capital. And my sense, that's, I think at this point, one of the bigger opportunities for businesses. So how can they tap into those pools and into those new agendas that are now being set? So maybe I'll pause there, and then I believe I see some things coming in through the chat. Hand it back to Alison, and I think we're heading into the Q&A session.
Yes, well, thank you very much indeed for that, Martijn. Gosh, a lot of content in there from Black Bear and its journey, and I think that's certainly a message that I've heard on a number of different occasions actually through our discussions with the Netherlands about this, the importance of bringing your partners or your customers together at the start of the journey. And as I say, sometimes it means that you're not always having easy conversations, but at least they're in the room with you and understand the ambition of where you're trying to go. And as you say, at least you automatically know that you're going to have customers because you've got them part of the process and behind the aspiration and ambition. So I think you framed up for Black Bear three big takeaways. One is involving all of those customers in discussions at the outset and going on that journey with them. And then I suppose by osmosis, that means that all of those partners will then be part of the ambition and want to potentially do that at their own organisation level. The technical scale up in terms of how do you get something from lab to factory. And I think those of us who've been in and around circular economy stuff for some time now, you know, the relevance of making sure that something is actually commercially viable is really important. So, I mean, there will be, or at least start and fail fast and move on. So I suppose that was a really point that resonated with me in terms of lab to factory and the scale up. And then the last point about telling the story and the marketing and the international exposure that was secured as a result of that. So that was really helpful. And in terms of the circular economy itself, clearly, I think at the heartbeat of that organisation, which is a social enterprise, to have the ambition to scale to get cities around the world to become circular is no mean feat. And we've been on a journey for a long time in Glasgow. We've been doing stuff with London. We hear the same chat from London. It takes a long time to get some of this stuff shifting. But I doff my hat to you and the team in the circular economy in the Netherlands, because there are a lot of cities in the world when it comes to actually trying to kind of scale this activity. And I know you are a small team at the circular economy in the Netherlands, so it's certainly been great to be working with you. Now, there are a number of different questions. I see that Andrew's kindly already answered Krista's one, which was about pointers around advances that would have been possible without the large investment. So he's answered that there, and you'll see that. So I'll not bring that up specifically. Some observation from Jill Dykes about not trying to sell to stakeholders, but basically engage with them on the journey. It's certainly at the beginning stages, and naturally they will probably become customers as they go along that journey, and helping you to get that product market fit. Then we've got a question from Richard Mallinson, and this is to all of you. So I'm just going to read it, and then we'll make sure that we're getting it absolutely framed the way he would like it, which is: globally scaled supplier chains now in decline with the environmental protectionists and indeed COVID drivers. He's basically wanting to know, is that likely to be sort of ongoing? And he's referencing, smiling at Andrew's talk about supply chain within 30 miles, and how ironically that was the norm in manufacturing supply chain prior to the drive to introduce low-cost sources in the 90s. So would anybody, let me just maybe go back to Martijn, given that he's just finished. Have you got any observations in supply chain and the local sourcing versus low-cost sourcing and so on?
Well, I think holistically, I think what this COVID crisis has shown is that a lot of companies are very vulnerable in terms of their supply chains. You know, with certain areas going in lockdown and not be able to sort of meet demands. And I think one of the things that, you know, will happen, and of course that's also part of the circular economy thinking, is that, you know, you should become more resilient also as a region, and make sure, you know, you're not trying to ship everything across the world to save a couple cents, but also take the, you know, risk into consideration of doing that. And you know, I think somebody said it in the chat as well. I mean, that's, you know, typically I think how, you know, nature is organized, but also how supply chains used to be organized. People were like, you know, you had clusters of manufacturing with suppliers sort of around it, and there was sort of close collaboration. And I believe that's the model to proceed. And if you have a sector where you know, people feed off each other, I think that can be highly beneficial.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to ask Paul to come in that, because he's got some comments he'd like to make on the supply chain point.
Yeah, I really, I too welcomed Richard's point, and I suppose I think I want to add there some honesty, which is not necessarily that we'll see that change in the right direction, Richard. So I can say that from some experience. You know, that in the heart of the coronavirus crisis, you talked to one manufacturer who made about 20% product which went into essential medical protective equipment, and that flipped to 80%. And I asked them, how are you going to reorganize yourself for the expectation that that will continue as we source, you know, within the UK for future needs? And he said, I don't expect it to stay that way at all. You know, the public procurement metrics as they're set up just now, we'll look at it and say, you know, anything above 10 pence a garment more expensive, we'll go back to the old supply chain routes when that allows. So I think the answer to that is not necessarily, but there is a massive opportunity, because I think coronavirus has underlined a different angle as to why you know, supply chains which are as expanded and as fractured as they are can place at risk. And then you come back to the topic which we were most concerned at the start of the year, then it underlines it. It's one area I think for us and Glasgow Chamber and Scottish Chambers to underline that for that there needs to be some lead by example, and in that case the public procurement needs to lead by example. So for that they need to set some procurement policies which give manufacturers time to adapt. So yes, we may be 10 pence per garment more expensive to start with, but if we have visibility of longer term supply, then investments can be made, automation can be added, and that can be brought into, you know, once you look at the total end-to-end impact that can come in. And what we'll see from that is a lead by example, which hopefully will then permeate through our industry of people looking at holding everything up to light and adding up the full cost of ownership, including the 8 weeks on the sea and any logistic costs and the environmental impact overall. But it won't happen by, you know, just on its own accord. We need to push and shove and kick slightly to get that opportunity.
That's terrific, Paul. Thanks very much for that. And I think I'm just going to bring Andrew in, but I'm going to slightly tweak that question a wee bit to just say, you know, how would you suggest that organisations can leverage their supply chains and partners to drive change across the value chain in the wider industry? So it's still a supply chain point, but it's how do you work that more effectively to the benefit for your business, but also their business in the bigger picture, and demonstrate that leadership?
I think for us, really, the main part has really been working with our suppliers. We're very lucky, I suppose, in a lot of ways that our suppliers and our customer base are all in the UK, and not exclusively, but a large proportion. And we see a lot of the drivers coming from our customers to us in terms of the demands that they're placing and the expectations that they expect to see from us, and we tend to drive that into our supply chain and really working very closely and developing long-term relationships, which has been a key part for us with our suppliers. And it was a very difficult thing at the beginning for us because we were loss-making to do that, but that was a key part for us, is really driving it with long-term relationships. Hello?
Thank you for that. Yes, thank you for that, Andrew. Sorry, I just unmute. We're kind of everybody's dialing down microphones and videos to sort of make sure that the technology works as effectively as possible. So I'm going to go to a point that was made by Jill Dykes, actually, and wait till I just find it. It's around the consumption of products, and you know, the aspiration that if a product is being designed and made in alignment with circular economy principles, clearly it's obviously going to have a longer shelf life. And I suppose there could be a bit of a clash in thinking around, you know, is that a risk to cash flow for that business in itself? And what advice would any of the speakers offer to companies who are in this space? So I'd like to kind of throw to Doug first of all, because Doug's actually come back with some comments on the thread, but I'd like to ask Doug to just expand a little bit on what he said here for everybody else's benefit. Doug. Doug, you'll need to unmute.
Yep, I'm going to reveal my age, but I remember a time when we didn't consume so much, and I'm not that old. And we kind of had, not everybody in the street had a lawnmower or a drill, and you borrowed. There was a kind of sharing economy. I remember Glenn's, Robertson's, Hutchinson's and Stepec, which was where you got your electrical goods like TVs and videos and things, and you hired them, you rented them. Not everybody did, but they were available to do that because they were quite expensive items to buy. And I think that, you know, milk bottles, everybody remembers a time, of a certain age, where we didn't consume so much. We looked after things. There was repair shops, and things were designed to last. They were built to last. There was a durability, and they were designed to be repaired. Now, I think with easy credit, which came in, and then people were able to buy things on credit, and allows us to be able to consume far more. Who has too much stuff in their house? And I think that the kind of habits we have just now of just this free consumption and easy consumption, we don't think there's a cost to that. We're obviously being educated more and more, and we're seeing the blue planet effect in terms of seeing all that plastic that's going to the ocean, and we're seeing textiles and you know, the amount of water and chemicals that are used to be able to produce a cheap T-shirt from Primark. You know, fast fashion, is it really what we're going to have to continue as a consumer? Businesses say they respond to consumer demand. I think that actually consumers are looking for something different, and manufacturing and engineering companies are going to have to understand how they can decouple their own growth from the finite resources. The planet has only got so much stuff in the ground that we can keep digging out, using probably once, and then just throwing away. So we're going to see behavioural change. We already have. We've got Extinction Rebellion looking for quite abrupt change, but we've got, unfortunately, either an opportunity, if we can adapt our business models and understand the shifting needs of our customers in a way that we can create new services, new value propositions to satisfy their needs, which with a different kind of product and service combination, and that we're going to, if we don't move quickly enough, every business will have to become more digitally enabled. We're going to have to look at designing out waste, and we're going to have to look at understanding these shifting customer needs. And it is unfortunate, but I will say that many companies won't survive that shift. So I was on a platform with the head of sustainability, Coca-Cola, in the attractions industry, theme parks, Disney, all that sort of thing. And I actually said to her, how will you stop selling so much fizzy water or sugary water? Because if you think that you're going to keep on bringing recycling the plastic bottles, and that's the way your business model is going to survive, that's probably not the way forward. And she said, yes, we're looking at that. We're looking at how we can stop producing so much plastic. So business models, fundamental business models, are going to have to face an existential challenge to what is their operating model. Is our customer going to not need to use things so much and throw them away, or not want to do that? And how can we adapt to doing that? And it's really important that we don't wait for the punch in the face, that we try and mobilise as an industry moving forward now.
Great, thank you very much for that, Doug. So we've got another question here from Paul Counter. We're probably going to do 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up, because I'm just mindful of time, but I'm keen to make sure that we get the opportunity, because we've got such great speakers, that people get the opportunity to get their questions actually answered. We've got Paul Cantwell asking Andrew, how much did Sheffield aid in this process, and what tools help map out improvements in your process?
Sorry, could you repeat that again? Sorry.
How much did Sheffield aid in this process, and what tools helped map out improvements in your process?
Yeah, the Sheffield collaboration really was for us to try and understand our process. I think a lot of this, I think I said to Kirsta earlier on, we didn't really understand what was driving our processes and also our products, and so a key part of that was to get some understanding. One of the best universities in the UK for glass technology, so we spent a lot of time with them, and that collaboration with them coming to site and us visiting them to understand it and understand the drivers, because in essence, so without being too complicated about it, is if we can make finer fibre that's strong enough, we can basically provide the same thermal insulation with less material, and that was really the key driver. Without, and more importantly, without sacrificing the product quality and the performance. So that was the key part. So it was really a very strong collaboration with them, because we were trying to understand their process as much as they were, and we kind of drove to a very, and it wasn't a academic exercise. It was about us coming up with a solution that we would drive into the factory and into our processes.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So I am going to ask one more question. I'm actually going to ask Martijn this time, and it's a question about probably more in the Industry 4.0 space with regards to circular economy. And it's really, you know, you've mentioned the importance of technology and scaling sort of product in terms of scaling it from lab to market, if you like. But how do you think disruptive technologies have changed the game, and you know, how much more and how might they continue to do so? What kind of things do you think we might expect to see over the next few months and year or so ahead, from your perspective?
Well, so I mean, I think it's pretty an understatement that the current COVID crisis will be a big accelerator for anything digital. I mean, I think it's really almost a tale, you know, of two worlds, right? You have the digital world, especially the bigger companies that are all-time stock highs, and the more traditional, you know, bytes and physical companies that are much more suffering through this crisis. And you know, layer on that the different ways of working, and you know, as we're having this digital conference, I think this is a transformational experience for a lot of people, and I think it will be a transformational experience for a lot of companies. So at Circle, we're especially excited, and we have been going down the road of, you know, enabling a lot of the new models through digital means. And one of the things we started to do, for instance, is, you know, trying to put all our knowledge that we have learned in the city space and turn it into digital tools that ultimately would be usable for everybody involved. Because if you think about that as a scaling mechanism, that's of course much more efficient than you know, doing it city by city. So I think, and I think somebody alluded to that as well. I think the companies who have, even in the more traditional sector, spearheaded the digital innovations will be much more resilient through this crisis, and will be much easier to pick it back up than the companies that are still stuck in the old ways.